It's David Sisco. Welcome to the show, David. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, Marissa. It's so great to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me to have this chat with you. Love
Oh,
it.
such a pleasure. I must say, I'm totally envious. I follow you on Facebook. Obviously, we're friends on Facebook, and you're always posting these most beautiful shots of the Hudson River around where you live. And I just go, oh my gosh, I want to be there with you.
That's so sweet. Well, we do have a guest room, so when you come to New York, but we I have to say about our place that my husband found it, and we just literally waltzed into the most perfect situation in the city. And there are ways that New York City will beat you down, but there are other ways where New York City will provide for you. And this apartment was one of those ways. We love where we are in Hudson Heights in the Upper Manhattan.
Yes, you must pinch yourself at times and go, look at my life.
Daily, daily.
Yes, yes. It's so important though, isn't it, to maintain that gratitude?
It absolutely is, and actually, there's not a morning that I don't come out of our bedroom into the living room, and I see the George Washington Bridge, I see the water, I see the Palisades across the way, and I'm in the sky, and that seems silly to say, but for those who don't live in New York, being able to see sky as a New Yorker in your apartment
Mm-hmm,
is a luxury
mm-hmm.
for most of us. Normally, we're just looking at another building. So the fact that we get to see sky, it really does start my day uh, in gratitude because I'm so grateful for the space, and at the end of a long day to come back and
Yes,
to receive the space and to be with my beloved and in it is it's a blessing.
it absolutely is. And I have to say that I have a crush on your beloved. He is just so beautiful.
He
And, sorry, people who are listening, you heard it. You're all the witness to this. David just invited me to stay in the guest bedroom. So if ever he reneges on that, I'm going to play this back to him.
Excellent. Please do. Please do.
Anyway, David, we're going to get started with learning more about you. There is so much to unravel here. There are so many things that you do, and I don't even know how you sleep. But you describe yourself as a multi-hyphenate artist, and your life work centers around exploring music, drama, writing, and teaching, and finding great inspiration and commonalities in each. And as I, I just asked you, when do you sleep?
Do you know I do sleep? I promise. I sleep about 6 to 7 hours a night. I'm just a fiercely good multitasker and someone who's also very good at compartmentalizing.
Mhm.
Um, I and to that, and I can kind of break big projects down into bite sizes, and say, all right, today I'm going to write this paragraph of this overarching idea. I don't have to write the whole thing, and so I think honestly, there's the creativity side of my being, which I'm very grateful for, but there's also kind of this very kind of organized um, side that, and they seem to work together, and I try to make sure they work together for good,
Mhm.
mostly.
Yes.
I seem to get a lot of accomplished as a result.
Are you a Virgo?
I'm not. I'm actually an Aries.
Oh, I was going to say that sounds like a Virgo to me.
Oh yeah, yeah, I love that. Love that.
Very disciplined and very highly organized. So, your background here, David, what's your earliest memory of you singing?
Um, this is kind of funny and sad. The first memory I have of myself singing was actually in kindergarten around Christmas time. And we were all given these sparkly red bow ties to wear.
Oh.
for our little concert. We were performing one Christmas song as
Hmm.
part of this little concert. And I somehow, in between when they handed them out and the performance time, I lost my bow tie. And I was inconsolable and literally wept through the entire performance. And so that is actually one of my first memories singing.
No,
Um,
that's
I,
tragic for a little
I,
kindergarten child.
oh my gosh, my poor dad, he was like, "It's okay. You're still gonna sing, and it's gonna be beautiful and wonderful." I would have none of it. They didn't have an extra one. I was just beside myself. And
Wow.
I mean, I've always had a penchant for fashion, literally always.
Hmm.
So
I know
it's that's.
because what were you doing in Vienna during ICVT?
I mean, I was attending
Yes,
conference sessions,
but as
but
well.
as well at the end. I mean, we stayed on a couple days. Albert, my husband, and I stayed on a couple days with our friend Aaron, who was in town with us, and we did go shopping because
Of course.
you one of my favorite things to do is go shopping when you're traveling,
Hmm.
abroad, because there's something so special, and you don't have to buy a ton, but to just put something on in the morning and be like, oh, I bought this when I was in Vienna, and then you think
Yes,
of all the
I
wonderful
know.
people you met, and
Hmm.
it's such a wonderful way to kind of mark the travel that you've been blessed to have.
Yes. And you don't have to do the hard sell on shopping for me because
I know I don't.
I
I know
love
you.
clothes and I love fashion and I love being stylistic. So
Well,
anyway,
you're always well turned out. So
oh, thank you. So are you.
thank you.
Yes. So when did you realize then that you could actually sing?
I think it was pretty early on. I mean, I think in elementary school I knew I loved to sing, certainly. I actually started piano when I was in first grade, and one of the stories I often tell about me when I was young, I marched up to my elementary school teacher, Mrs. Goodwill, and I told her I'd be taking over her job upon my graduation from high school. Um, so I was a little precocious, and I knew that music was for me. I knew that that was what I was going to do for my life.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it was really probably around fourth or fifth grade that I really felt like, oh, singing is something that I excel in and that I really enjoyed. And I started even in middle school. I was in the adult choir at church, so that was something that then just kind of grew from there.
I love the fact that you said you were precocious. I Precocious children are my favorite children to teach because I think they're the ones that have got the sass and the attitude to actually do something with themselves, like
I
moving
I
forward into
agree.
the future. But then did you start having lessons of any kind? Like any singing lessons?
Yeah, I took, you know, um, lessons in kind of a group lesson situation, as often happens in like middle school and high school in the United States, through choir. But my first kind of professional quote unquote lessons were through the New York State Summer School of the Arts choral
Hmm.
studies program that I was part of 3 years in high school during the summer. I worked with Dr. Everett McCorvey, who is I saw for the first time at the Nats conference in Chicago this past
Oh
July. I had seen him for 20 years,
my
and this man
gosh.
completely was just such the an embodiment of love and grace and knowledge. And so I was so blessed to have him be my first teacher, and then of course to reconnect with him.
Hmm.
And the lessons were more on the classical side of things.
Right. Okay. So then you went on to study voice formally, and you have a BA in vocal performance and composition honors from Syracuse. You have a master's in vocal performance from Boston University School of the Arts. From there, where did you head into? Did you continue to have classical training and did you then go into a performance career or did you go into a teaching career? How did your work pan out?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I I was very grateful for my my early training with Dr. McCorvey and the teachers that I had in undergrad, Dr. Carl Johengen, really wonderful, wonderful voice teachers. And they all prepared me for the career I thought I was going to have. And that's not where, as often happens, that's not where life took me.
Where
Um,
was that? What was that?
I thought I was going to do more classical music, more opera, and art song. And I realized mainly in graduate school that, I have a very light baritone voice. I was never going to sing Verdi. I was going to do some lovely Handel operas and art song recitals and things like that. And I love all of that. I think it's fantastic. But I realized um, that I wasn't going to have the career that I thought I would. And at the same time, to be honest, and I've talked about this openly, so it's not a surprise, but I had some really negative experiences in graduate school that
Mm,
left me feeling as if um, I should not sing in public. That was the narrative that I received um, from um, from the community there, and
wow.
that was it was never said to me in those particular words, but it was what was not said, as is often the case, and it was a lack of opportunity that I had in graduate school that made me feel as if I really wasn't special or gifted in any sort of way
Mm-hmm.
vocally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that really hampered me um, for many, many years. And as a result, to kind of answer your question, is that I felt like, well, I love teaching. I discovered teaching non-majors during my second year of graduate school, and I loved it. And I then started teaching at Boston University Tanglewood Institute during the summer, and I loved that. And so I decided, maybe I'm more of a teacher and more of a composer. Maybe that's where life is taking me. And I'm thankful to say that that balance has now changed.
Yes. And did you have a performance career then?
Not in the way that many people do when they graduate from a master's program. I What I did was I created performance opportunities for myself. I wrote a one man show, as many young musical theater writers do,
Yes.
painfully autobiographical, and I performed that. I wrote a one act opera based on a short story by James Thurber, and kind of cast myself in that because I felt like this is something that I really fit.
Mm-hmm.
I performed in church. I had a really extraordinary professional choir job when I first moved to New York at Marble
Wow.
Collegiate Church. And not only was I doing a lot of solo work for them, but I wrote a lot of contemporary Christian pieces for services,
Amazing.
and which was all wonderful. I did some musical theater and opera work, but as I said, when I received this message, uh, however kind of under the radar it was, I actually created a psychosomatic issue for myself in that anytime I went to sing in public, honestly, outside of a sanctuary, I would get sinus infections, really debilitating sinus infections, to the point where I would
Wow.
wake up with no voice at all. Um,
Wow. So it was self-sabotage in a sense.
100% self-sabotage, yeah.
Was that
Um,
because
I
of
would,
the experience that you had with these people saying that you should not perform in public?
Yeah, and to be clear, I had a great voice teacher, I had a great
Hmm.
coach in graduate school, but because the atmosphere was very political and there's a lot of kind of fighting amongst the powers that be there. That's the narrative that I received. To be clear, it was never said directly to me in that
Yes.
way, although
Yes.
I will say it was hinted at, which was painful.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, I got to the point I was doing a series of concerts with my friend Alexandra Foucard. We had a cabaret duo called Comes Love. and we got asked to be part of this international cabaret festival, which was fantastic here in New
Amazing.
York.
Yes.
And we were performing 2 nights, and we decided to video record the second night. And the first night, I could feel the sinus infection coming on. And the morning of the second night, I literally woke up with no voice. And I had 5 students, Marissa, that I had to teach that day before that evening's concert. And that was really the turning point for me, where I said, I am doing this to myself. Other people have either said it to me directly or non-directly, about my talent as a singer, but I have chosen this narrative, and so I had to really look at that, and I actually sat down with each of the students that I had that day and said, you know, I don't believe in myself as a singer,
You said that to your
and
students.
yeah, and
Oh my gosh.
I'm making myself sick as a result of it,
Hmm.
and I want you to, I'm telling you this not for you to feel sorry for me or for anything. I want you to know that there is this mental emotional connection that we have to our
Mm.
singing. And it's
Hmm.
so important to investigate that as much as we investigate our technique, because if we don't remain good stewards of that landscape, these types of things can happen to us. And as God is my witness, and the videos are out on YouTube somewhere, my voice was almost 100% back by that evening's performance. I
Oh,
sang the concert, and I was completely. Was it my best singing that I've ever done? No,
no, no, no.
but I was I most of the sinus infection completely disappeared. My voice came back,
Mm.
and I was able to perform and find a level of satisfaction in that.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
it's been that was several years ago, and it's been an evolution to kind of continue to reclaim that space ever since.
Yes, I 100% believe in what you've just said. I mean, not only are there the students that when it comes to exam time or they have a competition, they lose their voices or they become sick, but also to just share this with you quickly. I had a student maybe 6 months ago, and she was constantly having tonsillitis.
Mm.
And she came in this particular day to her lesson once again with tonsillitis. And I, I just have this intuition from time to time. And I just asked her, what aren't you saying?
Mm.
And she looked at me. I said, I believe there's something that you're not saying, and it's triggering these problems with your throat. There's something that you need to speak up about. Is there something that you need to be sharing with someone, or in a situation where you don't feel that your voice is being heard? And she burst into tears and she said, I haven't come out to my parents yet because I'm scared, and I feel that I really want to. It's the next part of me moving on with my life. And she continued to cry, and she said, I've never told anyone that before. And isn't it amazing that tonsillitis was a manifestation of something that she wasn't saying? So I 100% agree with the situation that you found yourself in. It's not something that's in your mind. Well, it is kind of, but it's manifesting in the body.
Yeah, I, and to kind of to bring this to a happy ending, um, probably I, the happiest I've been as a performer was this past summer. I decided that, when I had been performing, it was basically behind the piano. I love playing. I'm a decent player,
Yes.
and uh, so I love accompanying myself at the piano. There's something that's very intimate and lovely about it. But I decided that, I needed to do a solo show, which I hadn't done in 20 years. And I needed to stand center stage, and tell my story. And so I wrote this show that literally had me starting at the piano and saying, everything's fine, we're fine, everything's fine, and telling the story of going through this process, and then finally, by the middle of the show, standing center stage and saying, I deserve to be here. You
Wow.
know, I did all the arrangements and orchestrations, six-piece band, and it was so empowering because
Mhm.
I had my students in the audience, and I was doing it for me because I had to, but I was also doing it for them because I want them to know that, I think that we're going to talk about this later, I know, but we have to continue to invest in ourselves so we can invest in our students.
Mhm.
And I see my students being brave in ways that I sometimes only wish that I could be. And so that was an opportunity to kind of claim more space, and say, no, I actually really love singing. And oh my God, once I got on that stage, I was like, you are not getting me off of here. It felt so good. And I'm already, I'm not going to do it tomorrow, but I'm already kind of planning my next show, which is really exciting.
Well done to you.
Oh,
Well
thanks.
done. That is a really happy story. And
Thank you.
no, it is. That's so to me, that sounds like that is one of your career highlights.
Absolutely is. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you just said, how we have to look at ourselves before we look at others. And one of our colleagues put up on Facebook over the weekend, be kind, be kind, be kind, something like that, and talking about pedagogy, that as teachers we need to be kind. And I put, yes, if anyone sees it, I don't know, but we must be kind to ourselves first. How can you be kind to others when you're not being kind to you?
Yeah. If we're not willing um, to offer that kind of self care to ourselves,
Yes.
then how can we offer the kind of vulnerability that I think we need to offer to our students? Because it's such a intimate and um, challenging um,
Mm.
journey. I said, just off my first week of teaching at NYU Steinhardt, where I've been for 3 years now and love it there. And I said to all my new students, I said, I'm, I want to, I want you to know that I realize how difficult this relationship can be because I'm literally messing with your identity. Your voice is so wrapped up in who you are as a human being, and I'm messing with that now in a way to create more artistic expression. So it's for a good reason. I'm not just kind of trying to make you do things that make you uncomfortable.
Mm.
But we have to. The only way that we can create those spaces, I think, is by doing that work ourselves.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to back a little bit, and we're going to talk more about that because we both feel so strongly about this, creating safe spaces for our students. But just in terms of your actual voice teaching, how long have you been teaching now?
Oh dear, I'm going to age myself.
Well,
Well,
we're all
on
21 on this show.
exactly.
We're all 21, David. It's
I have a
fine.
rule that anything over 5 years is about 5 years, but I don't. But that said, I don't want to diminish the time because it's offered a lot of hard-earned knowledge. So I've been teaching for a little over 20 years.
Hmm.
I started, as I mentioned, teaching that non-majors class during graduate school, and then I taught a class of my own design at a school in Boston. I actually taught private voice lessons at another school there. And then when I moved to New York, eventually worked at Marymount Manhattan College, which is a very strong musical theater program. Worked there for 10 years. Worked at Wagner College as an adjunct professor, and now at NYU Steinhardt. So about 20 years I've been working.
Hmm. So, in terms of your teaching, do you have a teaching methodology that you use, or do you have like a grab and pick and created a toolbox of approaches?
Yes, thanks for asking that. one of the things I talk to all of my students and clients about is that I ask them to think about healthy singing as a rotunda or circular building with many different points of entry. And I think it's my job as their teacher to help them find as many different ways in
Hmm.
to the center of that building as possible. And what we know is one particular door is not going to unlock today because this particular key is not the way in, right? And so, like, how do we find lots of different ways in? And the other thing I'll say is that we as voice teachers use the same warm up or vocal conditioning exercise, I'll call them really, because that's what they are.
Hmm.
We'll use the same conditioning exercise for completely different reasons, depending on the
Exactly.
student,
Yes.
right? And so for all of those reasons, I would say that I don't teach a particular method. I am an equal opportunity borrower. I love borrowing from lots of different people, just getting as many good ideas as I can to bring in.
Hmm.
And I think that's important both um, because our students are coming with a lot of different perspectives. And so what works with one student, what translates to one student really well may not translate to another. So I have to have lots of different ways of approaching it. And I also find that teaching a particular method can be, not always, but can be limiting, especially because we
I
have such
agree.
we have such varied students these days, right?
Hmm.
In our studios, and so it's never a one size fits all. And so
No,
I think we all have in our communities, regardless of what genres may be our kind of keystone um, uh, focus. I think we all have a tremendous amount to learn from each other and to borrow from each other.
I agree. As student-centered learning is the way that we must approach our teaching, and a
Yeah,
method's not going to help you get there. And I actually did a little reel on this on Instagram last week or the week before, saying that our teaching must be around the student, and by sticking to a method, you're actually endorsing a one size fits all approach to teaching. And it's not
correct.
going to work. Yes, exactly. Yes. And has there been someone who's greatly influenced your teaching? Is there a one person or something that you've heard at a conference, or someone that you've looked up to, you've thought, wow, this person really inspires me, or I love what they've said, or I really need to use that in my studio?
Oh gosh, it's honestly it's an amalgam of like 30,000 different people.
Yes.
From and some of them are not even musical. Some of them are just who people are in space and how they um, create hospitality for other people. Like it doesn't have to be, I'm thinking particularly of a minister friend of mine, what he does to invite people into space, and how I seek to emulate that, and although in a very different venue as a teacher at a university. Yeah, lots of different influences, I would say.
Yes. And do you continue to update your learning? I know that you attend conferences because we ran into each other in Vienna at ICVT, and you said that you went to NATS. How important is that?
I think it's really important. I don't think it's everything,
Mm.
but I think it's really important. To me, it's learning how to. Well, first of all, I'm going to say something that is obvious to both of us, but I think it's important to say. If you are a teacher, you are a lifelong learner,
Hmm.
right? That's just the way it has to be. And the day that I feel like I know everything I need to know, I will retire because
Yes.
I've clearly lost something in the mix there. But um, I I think that conferences are great. I think that conferences sometimes though are great ways to get new ideas in, but they don't always allow you to kind of go deeper into things. I'm also a fan of workshops that actually where you have to kind of try things on yourself. Um, because
Mm,
it just, workshops that make us the student again, I think is really important, not only in terms of our learning and growing in our knowledge of teaching, but also so we remember what it's like to be a student, and
yes.
we can have that sensitivity. I think that's important. I think reading is tremendously important. Journals, books, I think our own research, things that inspire us, are important, um, as well. And so we'll talk about this later, but researching a new book right now, just because it's something that I feel like is I have a passion for that, um, hasn't maybe been looked at in the particular way that I think that it could be. And so I think it's bringing all of these things together. But I also want to say that I think it's important to honor knowledge. And that we have this phrase that we've been using the last couple of years, evidence based, right? Science, voice science. I'm here for it. I'm on board. But I also, you brought up something that I think is important to underscore, and that is that we also have to trust our intuition as
Mm,
teachers,
mm-hmm.
right? And so I think that, um, what I have found in a lot of my teaching is that I've had an intuition about a certain approach that I can say now, years later, I've read an article that I'm like, oh, that's the science behind what I was doing. I didn't necessarily know, I may not have known that in the moment, but I knew how to get there,
Mm.
right? And maybe this is my own, fear of, do I know enough? But I think sometimes we put so much emphasis on on uh, voice pedagogy and voice science, which again I think are tremendously important. But I think there are lots of different ways, as I said earlier, that rotunda, lots of different ways to get to the same place. And sometimes I will work with a student, for example, I we've all had these students, Marissa, where we're working with them and saying, and we know, like, oh my gosh, they're getting so tied up in their head. And if I give them one more technical tool, it's just gonna, it's just gonna halt the whole thing. So let me come at it from a completely different way. Let me come
Yes.
at it from the intention, the storytelling way,
Yes.
right?
You're singing my
And
songs.
yeah, and it does the same thing. So that is not to say intuition is the only way to go, or
Mm,
voice science is the only way to go. I think
mm.
it's this beautiful blending of all of that. And boy, I've gone on a kind of soapbox on that, but I
No,
hope that
no.
answers your question.
It does. It does. And it brings me to a couple of other points too. This year, I decided that I would sit back in a class that I did in 2008. It was a postgraduate program.
Mm.
And I've just been sitting in there. We call it, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name. But anyway,
Yes.
we can sit in on classes. We don't have to pay for them once we've done the program. I teach in the institution. So I just sit in the corner and I've been doing 4 hours a week of vocal pedagogy. And so I did this in 2008. And boy, has the program changed
Oh yeah.
in terms of the content. And a lot of it, definitely science based, and to like all this work on acoustics. And to be fair, I am so dumb at that stuff. Like,
Oh, preach! You are singing
oh,
my song now.
I'm going, and it's really interesting to sit in, having had so much more experience now, having a PhD or having had learned that, being in that academic space, but also picking up so much from other people, even through this podcast.
Yeah.
And I don't always agree. And I don't believe that there's only one way to do something, and it shouldn't be preached that way either. And then even going to ICVT,
Mm,
there was a change in the guard there at ICVT. I noticed
yeah.
that really filled my soul, and that was that it is not about us as teachers, people like yourself, like myself. There was a gentleman there from, I think he was San Antonio, who talked, you were in his room as well, and he talked about the master apprentice model and how,
Yes.
yes, and but there is a changing of the guard where it's becoming more about the student and less about ourselves. And that really made me feel so happy because I've heard so much about the science, and I agree that we need to know why we're doing something, but science isn't going to fill all the gaps in our teaching. A
Correct.
machine, staring at a machine, a spectrograph, or whatever it is that you're looking at, it's not going to tell you what's going on in the minds of the students. We haven't lived a day in their shoes. We
Right.
don't know what's going on that is impacting the voice. And as you articulated earlier with your sinus infection, or you having something going on that was emotional, the science ain't going to cut that.
No.
So, what are your thoughts on all of that with the science of teaching?
Um, yeah, I mean, I would say I totally agree with everything that you're talking about, and I think that this master apprentice. I think it was Travis Sherwood is who you
Oh,
were
yes,
mentioning. What a
yes.
great presentation and
Oh,
such a super guy. A
oh,
really great
amazing. That
conversation
was
with
one
him.
of my highlights.
Yeah, yeah, same. Um, I think that when we talk about master apprentice model, as Travis said so eloquently in his presentation, um, we're talking about students who like were actually living under the roof of the teacher, and they were in charge of their entire being, including their
Mm,
morality and all of this
mm-hmm.
stuff. And I don't think any of us want our students living with us.
No,
No,
no.
thank you. But there's also, I from the research I have done specifically on that model through the centuries, 17th, 18th centuries, especially, um, you know, it's very codependent, and I still see this in our industry where it's like you need me, you need me to get where you want to go. And
Mm.
I'll be very frank and say that that's gross. That
Oh,
is so gross to me, and it's lacks integrity, and it's not well, it's not true. also, like
mm,
because there's so many, as we've said, there's so many different ways to get to that um, to, to a particular place, and so
exactly. That's just ego.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's we're I will say too that I feel that we are in a particular you know our, many of our countries, and I believe in my understanding of where Australia is, this may be true there too, but certainly in the United States we are very polarized, and everyone is so busy trying to plant flags in the ground that they don't realize that there are
Yes.
30 other flags that had been there before them,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and that by the way nobody owns that land, and so
Yes. So well said. I
you
love
know
your analogies.
oh
No,
thanks.
no, so well said. No one owns the ground or the
No.
land. Yay.
And let's keep on finding different ways of saying this either the same things or different things as we continue to learn together. But yeah, we're in this age where we are, as you said, student-centered learning, and I'm asking my students, what do you, so in these 4 years, if it's undergrad, or 2 years if it's graduate school, what do you want to leave with? What do you want? I know this probably
Mm,
feels a little daunting to answer right now in your first lesson. You just know me for two seconds. But if you had to guess, based on where you are at this point in your life, where would you like your life to take you? What do you feel like you want to say with your artistry? And because my job is to not to look down upon you from a pedestal. It's to be on the ground with you and look with you into the
Mm,
future and say,
mm,
okay, then if that's where you want to go, then let's head in that direction. It may change. That's okay. But how do we get there? How do
mm,
we get there? And what is technical about that? What is mental and emotional about that? What is just industry knowledge? The things you need to know about, the industry that you're going into. What are the different components of that? And I'm not going to be able to do all of that because that's why you go to college and work with lots of different people. But based on my knowledge of teaching, how can I bring my unique skill sets to support where you want to go? Because my God, these students are paying, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars for their education. We sure as heck better be student centered. you know?
yes. And there's quite a few things here that I want to touch on because
Sure,
you've
please.
just like, whoa, yes, 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 yes to everything that you're saying. Basically, what you're doing is straight up, you're creating a safe space for your students. You're asking them the questions. What are your needs? You're asking them, what do you want? It's not about you. And hallelujah to you for doing that. We can, many people can learn from that one thing. What do you need? What do you want? What are your goals?
Yeah.
They're not mine. So working in that higher education setting, and you know, and you and I do as well,
Mhm.
and we know what students are paying for their education. Do you feel that universities or higher education institutions in general, not speaking about where we're teaching, because well, you
Sure.
don't want to lose your job, and neither do I. But
Correct.
but I'm fine because my students and the program that they're in a popular music program, and
Yeah,
they by third year, well, already 6 out of my 9 vocalists in first year are working
that's
and
wonderful.
in and gigging and releasing new music. They're writing. They're doing very well. The program is very well structured. So I'm in a very unique position, I believe. But in general, do you feel that higher education institutions are equipping students with the skills they need to be employable?
It's a very good, and I'll admit, a very loaded question.
Oh, yes,
even though,
you can.
even taking,
Yeah, I
even
loaded the
taking our,
gun.
yeah, that's okay.
I
I,
loaded it.
that's totally okay. I will answer the question certainly. And what I will say is this: I, you know, I have been blessed to teach in academia for, as I said, about 20 years, give or take, and what I've seen at the institutions where I've taught, where I've observed as an artist in residence or as some sort of guest, I've seen some extraordinary training. These where students, and I'm going to speak from, I should say, from my personal lens, which tends to
Okay,
be more musical theater, right?
sure.
Um, I think that an opportunity for growth, I'm going to call it, is how we provide a context for the knowledge that we are teaching our students.
Mhm.
So, what do I mean by that? I mean, how can we say, okay, I'm teaching you this because based on where the industry is right now and where we think it's going, you're going to need to know this. And you're going to need to know this within this particular context. And I think that that's an area where I see a lot of institutions could grow. And in saying that, I want to acknowledge how hard that is, because it's literally like trying to steer the Titanic. In the musical theater, which I realize is an unfortunate example, um, but in musical theater, so much has changed in the
Yes.
last 5 years, and
Yes.
especially in the last 2 years. We are having woefully overdue conversations about equity and inclusion in the industry, not only on stage, uh, behind stage, in the creative teams, in the producing teams, everywhere. And so there needs to be wholesale change in our industry, and that change is, uh, I, from what I see, and I realize I am, for your listeners, you're only hearing my voice, but I'm, identify as a white cisgender man. I realize I am 100% in a place of privilege, but from where I'm seeing, I am seeing people at least acknowledge that change needs to happen, and I am starting to see some positive change happening. So all that is to say, to keep up with that at the higher education level is very difficult, especially if you were trying to create curriculum that keeps up with that. Right,
Hmm.
that is incredibly hard. But
Hmm.
um, that said, I think that um, there are ways where we can continue um, to help our students understand the industry into which they're going. It actually is the reason why my colleague Laura Josepher and I wrote this book during the pandemic, because what else were we going to do other than cook and
Yes.
eat?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So
And watch
Laura and I
Netflix.
and watch so much Netflix. Oh my God! Thank God we had that subscription. Um, we definitely used it. Laura and I created a book that came out this past March called "Performing in Contemporary Musicals," and um, just a little quick background. In 2000, gosh, I think it was 2012, 2000, yeah, 2012, I founded contemporarymusicaltheater.com, which is the largest online database of contemporary musical theater writers and songs. Being a musical theater writer myself,
Wow.
I and being a teacher, looking for great undersung musical theater repertoire for my students, I wanted to kind of connect these two communities. And
What
I'm
a
very
great
grateful that.
idea.
Thank you, thank you. And
Mm.
10 years on, and Laura is my trusted business partner on that. And we had done a handful of master classes and workshops with university students here in the States, and thankfully internationally we've had some great success. Um, and what we found was that, especially when it came to new work, many students didn't fully understand what was required of them. As someone who was entering into the life of a new musical, and they didn't know what it was like to have a composer, lyricist, book writer in the room. You know, they hadn't really investigated dramaturgy. They had maybe done script analysis, which is wonderful, but their script analysis is on like Tennessee Williams plays, which kind of work. I mean, like, he was kind of brilliant, right? But they weren't analyzing stuff that didn't work,
Hmm.
right? They weren't necessarily analyzing the structure of a musical. They weren't. It's fascinating to me, and I have not come across many musical theater programs that teach a class on collaboration, and yet it is the most collaborative art form I can think of. I mean, we have so many different hands in the pie, to kind of try to build something that works. So we felt like, hey, we really love developing new musicals. We had a chance to. Laura had directed several pieces of mine, and I worked as a music director. Was directing on some new works, and we said, why don't we write this book that brings this information and the information. I think some of the information will be new to readers, but I think the context of it is what is important, because I will tell you the first thing that a lot of musical theater performers are going to do straight out of college is new musicals. They're going to do readings and workshops of new shows while they're auditioning for established shows and touring productions. And so, um, I think that's what I'm really passionate about in working in the context of academia is like how do we create space to kind of move,
Mm,
our curriculum's so binding that we can't move with the industry, right? Um,
yes,
and
yes.
that's a hard question, and every institution's asking those questions, I think, and is trying to figure out the best way to do that for their particular students based on their particular goals for their students,
Mm.
and I think that's great.